Yourselves, raise your hand. You guys ever felt that? Man, I think we all have. That's what we're talking about today, church, so we wanted to open up with that. But let's stand together as we open and we invite our God into this place tonight. Church, it's so great to be here with you on this Father's Day weekend. My name's Daniel, and I'm one of the pastors here at the Refinery, and we just want to extend a special thank you and a special welcome to all of you who are here for your first time. We'd love to get to know you, and we just have a guest table set up out in our lobby. Swing by there after service. We'd love to get to know you. Why don't you guys take just a few moments, say hey to those around you, and we'll continue to sing together. Night has fallen, when fear is coming, still you're calling me. When faith is lost and my hope exhausted, you will be my strength. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up, 'cause you won't give up on me. You won't give up on me. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul. Come on, sing it in every season. In every season, you keep repeating promises to me. Whoa, now there's no stopping what you have started till it is complete. When my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up, 'cause you won't give up on me. No, you won't give up on me. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on, it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul. In my when my mind says I'm not good enough, God, you're enough for me. Yeah, I've decided I'm not giving up, 'cause you won't give up on me. No, you won't give up on me. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. Yeah. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out, breaking out. Yeah. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo. Your love is holding on and it won't let go. I feel it breaking out like an echo, echo in my soul. In my Father, we're so thankful that you hear us. God, we're so thankful that we know that regardless of where we're at in life, God, you'll seek after us. We can just reach out to you and you hear us, you hear our prayer. Father, we're so thankful. Hear our praises, hear our cries to you. Amen. Church, sing this with me, come on. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. My hope is built on nothing less than Jesus' blood and righteousness. I dare not trust the sweetest frame, but only trust in Jesus' name. Christ alone, cornerstone, weak made strong in the Savior's love. sing it again to the Christ alone. Christ alone.
So I was in my Bible this week and I was reading through John 6. And a story that a lot of us might be familiar with is when Jesus fed the 5,000, which is 5 loaves and 2 fish. And after that story, Jesus walks on water. Another amazing, amazing story. But one that I wasn't familiar with was right after that, when Jesus comes back. And the crowd surrounds him again and they say, "Oh, Rabbi, when did you get here?" And Jesus calls him out right away. He's like, "You're not here because you believe that I am who I say I am, or that you've seen signs. You're here because I fed you." And they go on to talk about the bread and the fish that Jesus gave them and multiplied among the people. And Jesus tells them, "Truly I tell you that there is a bread that quenches all hunger and all thirst, and you will hunger no more." And the crowd looks at Jesus and like, "Yeah, we'll have one of those, please." Jesus is like, I just can't imagine what Jesus is going through in this moment, trying to deal with these people who are standing in front of the Son of God, and all they can think about is the food that he gave them just a few days ago. But he's patient with them and he says, "Look, I am the bread of life. My flesh is true food, and my blood is true drink. And whoever eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him." And the crowd has a reaction that maybe some of you are having. That's a little bit gross. It's a little bit weird, man. What are you talking about? And they start walking away. And Jesus turns to his disciples and say, Are you going to leave too? Because even the disciples were confused. In a moment here, we're about to take part in communion. And I don't want us to make the mistake of just seeing the elements for what they physically are, right? A cracker and some juice. Because what Jesus was trying to explain to these people is that just as our stomach yearns for food, for life, our soul yearns for life. And Jesus was telling these people that this food may fill your stomach for a day, but I am the bread of life, and I fill your soul for eternity. And just as our stomach cries out and just we crave food, our soul does the same thing. We often don't recognize it. So our soul is craving life, and Jesus says that he can give that to us. So in this moment, we're going to take part in these elements, the bread and the cup. And they're stacked one on top of each other. And I want us to be thinking about the spiritual implications of what we're declaring as we partake in these elements. Because if we just see it for what it physically is, food, you're going to walk out of here hungry. It's not a lot. but our souls will walk out of here. If we take this in faith, in knowledge, in obedience, and we have faith that Jesus is who he says he is, and the sacrifice he made on the cross is what he says it was, then our souls can be filled for eternity. And we can be reunited with the Father, the Creator, the giver of life himself. Let's pray. God, we stand in awe of you. The mere fact that we can be in your presence, let alone speak to you, is a miracle, is a show of tremendous grace and mercy. But God, through your Son, through the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we know that through faith, we can be forgiven and we can be reunited with you, the Creator and giver of life. So God, as we take this time to obey a commandment of yours in communion, I pray that you would do mighty things in the people who take and eat in faith, God, in faith that you are who you say you are. I pray that they would walk out of here changed, and that their souls would be filled with your Spirit, and that they would yearn no more for life, but that you would fill them entirely for eternity. It's through your Son's name I pray. Amen. Right, as we stand and we begin to sing this next song, if we believe who Jesus is, who he says he was, then we know that as he ascended, he sent his Spirit to be our comforter, and that no matter what situation we're in, he is with us. So let's declare that as truth. There's a grace when the heart is under fire. space between what I used to be and this reckoning. I know I will never be alone. There was another in the fight standing next to me. There was another in the waters holding back the seas. And should I ever need reminding of how I'm being set free, there's a cross that bears the burden where another died for me. There was another in the fight. Oh, my dad left for dead beneath the waters. And I'm no longer a slave to my sin anymore. Should I fall in the space between what remains of me and this reckoning? Either way, I will bow to the things of this world. And I know I will never be alone. There is another in the fire standing next to me. There is another in the waters holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding, power set me free. There's a grave that holds nobody. Now that power lives in me. There is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. Oh, there is another in the fire. I can see the light in the darkness as the darkness bows to him. I can hear the roar in the heavens as the space between western. I can feel the ground shake beneath us as the prison walls cave in. Nothing stands between us. Nothing stands between us. There is no other name but the name that is Jesus. He who was and still is and will be through it all. So come what may in the space between all the things unseen and this reckoning. I know I will never be alone, and I know I will never be alone. There'll be another in the fire standing next to me. There'll be another in the waters holding back the seas. Should I ever need reminding 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. I'll count the joy come every battle, 'cause I know that's where you'll be. Amen. You can be seated.
I know that's the way it was in my household. We have a lot of don't tell mom stories that my kids and I have shared, and we're waiting for the statute of limitations to run out on several of those things before we can confess those things to her. But what's really neat is my kind of adult age kids are together now, and they'll start telling a story, and we're like, well, I didn't know about that. And Melissa was like, oh yeah, that was a don't tell dad. And she was like, well, I didn't know about that. Yeah, that was a don't tell mom. And so we're learning these things. But man, what a great experience it has been being a dad. And it is by far one of the biggest joys of my life. Has been raising 3 kids and now bringing another daughter into our family. It is the biggest joy of Melissa and I's life to be parents, and I know to be a dad. It's just been a fantastic journey and a fantastic ride for us. I know not everyone has that kind of a story, and I know there are a lot of difficulties, and I know there are a lot of heartaches, and I know there are a lot of stresses, and there have been in our lives too. Not everything has been rainbows and butterflies by any stretch of the imagination. But man, being a dad has been a great thing. But here's what we're talking about today, is there is a tremendous amount of pressure that comes along with being a dad. And I don't mean to elevate that above a pressure that a mom would face or anything like that. I can't relate to that. I'm not a very good mom. I would fail miserably at being a mom. And so I know a little bit more about being a dad than I do know about being a mom. And so what I want to do today is I want to spend a little bit of time talking about where some of these pressures come from and what they look like in our lives for us dads and how we deal with those. Now, I don't want to just kind of identify these 4 kind of key areas that I think are pressure filled and things that bring pressure onto dads. I also want to spend a little bit of time talking about how we can help our dads and the men in our life deal with these pressures, because we need help. And guys, we're never going to ask for help, are we? We're not going to ask for directions. We're not going to ask for help. We're just going to get lost, and we're going to run into things, and we're going to just wander aimlessly and all this kind of stuff. We're not going to ask for those things. So I'm going to turn in my man card here for a little bit this weekend, and I'm going to ask for some help. And I'm going to kind of give you some guidelines on a way that you can help us guys deal with some of these things. And so guys, please forgive me. I'm not going to let any big secrets out of the bag. I promise we'll keep those for another time. But I just want to spend some time diving in. And so here's what I want to do. I want to kind of identify these pressures and where they come from. And unfortunately, some of the pressures, the biggest pressures that we deal with as men and dads are self-imposed. I think a lot of them are self-imposed. A lot of them we bring on ourselves. Now, there are a lot of them that there are things that contribute to these pressures. It may be a pressure from a spouse or pressure from kids or a job or something like that. There may be some other things, but I think some of them are self-imposed. So here we go. We're just kind of dive in, and we're going to kind of go through these and talk through them one by one about what these pressures are and how we deal with them. The first thing I think we deal with that causes us to fail miserably as dads sometimes, and this pressure we have that comes from a pride that we have. We're prideful people. And that kind of goes back to the idea of, hey, I'm not going to ask for help. I can do this on my own. I can power through those kind of things. You remember Tim, the Toolman Taylor, in the Home Improvement show, just grunt get a power tool and tear something up. That's the way we do things. You know, that's the way we want things to happen. And so many times that's just out of pride. We don't ask for help. We don't stop and really think about it. Or we get this pride based on, I'm not as good as that guy. We have these things built up in our mind about this other guy that we see, and maybe he's more successful in a business way than we are, or his family seems to be doing better than we are, or something like that. And we say, well, I at least want to be as good as that guy, if not better. And so we get this pride inside of us. In Psalm chapter 10, verse 4, it says this, in this pride, the wicked does not seek him. In all his thoughts, there is no room for God. So many times when we get this prideful attitude, we just think, I can handle this, I can do it, I can power through, I can make it happen. Years ago, Melissa and I, we spent some time with some counselors in this deal in Colorado. It's kind of an intensive deal for pastors and their wives and stuff like that. We weren't having like any kind of crazy marital problems or anything like that. We were just tired and kind of wondering what was next in our life. And we spent some time with these experts. And one of the things that they said to me first on was this, or actually they said this to Melissa as we're sitting down. And the counselor, he looked over at Melissa and he said to her, he doesn't fail very often, does he? And she's like, no, if he pretty much sets his mind to something, it's going to happen, it's going to get done. And he goes, that's a huge problem. He's like, you're a prideful dude. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'd never really thought about it in that way. It's just like, you know, I'm a man, I'm going to power through, I'm going to get these things done. But it was pride that was driving me in so many ways. And pride comes from this idea that we're just kind of these egomaniac kind of guys. Big, strong, hunter-gatherers, you know, tough guys. Well, ego can mean a couple of things. Ego, if taken out of context, can mean that we edge out God. It can. It can mean that we're edge out God. We don't need God. We don't count on God. But it can also say, I'm going to exalt God only. In all that I'm do, I'm going to be a man who gives up my pride, and I'm going to turn things over to God first and foremost before I do anything else. In Romans chapter 12, verse 3, it says this, for by the grace given to me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourselves more highly than you ought. Okay? You're not nearly as good as you think you are. Now, you're not nearly as bad as you think you are either. And you're loved far more than you'll ever know. But you're not more than you think you are. Do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment. We could almost take that term sober judgment and transpose it in today's language of self-awareness. You need to be self-aware for what's going on in your life. Think of yourself with self-awareness. Know what your strengths are. Know what your weaknesses are. In accordance with the measure of faith God has given you. The things that have been going on in my body over the course of literally the last year, pride has been something that I've had to just, I had to get rid of it. There's so many things I just physically can't do right now that my lungs won't allow me to do. My muscles are kind of deteriorating. And so there's just things, even around the house, that I can't do. And we've been so gracious that people have helped us, or I've had to hire people to do things that I would normally have done myself and just to depend on those things. And I'm telling you what, it's hurt me as a guy. And I'm just going to tell you, there have been nights when I've laid in bed and I've confessed to Moses, like, man, this stinks as a guy to not be able to do these things and all those kind of things. But through all of that, what I found is that when we turn those things over to God, in our weakness, he is totally made strong. Time and time again. And so guys, we need to be people who are ready to give up your pride. And I hope it doesn't come down to you where it's a physical thing that takes your pride, but I hope that you make a conscious judgment to just say, okay, I'm not going to be prideful in this. I'm going to turn it over to God. I'm going to live in a community of people who we can do this together better. So if we're all dealing with pride, if guys are dealing with pride, how do we help him? How do we help with the pressure? As spouses, as kids, how do we help our dads? How do we help our husbands? How do we help the men in our life deal with pride? You need to affirm them. You need to affirm them. Now, I'm not saying you lie to them and say, hey, you're doing a great job when they're doing a great job. Don't do that. Okay, that's horrible. That's horrible for everyone. Don't do that. But when you see things are changing for the better, when you see small steps towards humility and giving things up, acknowledge those things and affirm those things and say thank you for those things. There's been so many times when I want to be good with tools. Even before I got sick, I wanted to be good with tools. And I like to buy tools, okay? But I can't work tools. I love to go through Home Depot or whatever and buy tools because I'm a guy. I need them in my garage, right? I need to have them, okay? But I don't know how to use them, and I'm not good with them. And usually things end up more broken or bleeding when I do that. But so many times, Melissa has said, just thank you. Thank you for hiring someone to do that. It is so much cheaper in the long run. You know, we don't have to go to urgent care. We don't have to get out the fire extinguisher. Just hire somebody. Just get somebody else to do it. You know, it's been so good to do those things. But just affirm him in those moments. Just say, it's okay. It's okay. And guys, I'm going to let something else out of the bag here. Many times, our pride is covering up for an insecurity that we have. It is. We think we're falling short. We think that we're failing miserably. And we have these insecurities deep inside of us. And we want to be kind of these big personalities, these big, strong, conqueror guys, when that's not really what's going on inside. And so we manifest this pride sometimes. So pride is a huge thing. And pride is a huge pressure that we deal with. And I think it's one that many times is self-imposed. Another pressure that we deal with just in life and in our society is greed. It's just stuff. It's just materialism that we deal with. There's a story that's told of an American yachtsman who's traveling throughout the Caribbean. And as he's traveling out through the Caribbean, he parks his boat one afternoon. And in parking his boat, he comes across a local fisherman. And he asks the local fisherman about his day. And the fisherman says, well, what I do is I sleep late every day. And then I get up and I work for about 4 hours. And that's usually about how long it takes me to catch everything that my family and I need for the day. And so I work about 4 hours. So usually about 2:30 or so, I'm finished. And we go have a late lunch with our family. And when the kids get out of school, we have this big meal together. And then every evening, my friends and I, we go into the town square and we play music together in the evening. Well, this American yachtsman, he was totally just kind of befuddled by this. He's like, I don't get this. He goes, you have got this great fishing spot. He goes, if you would get more boats and hire some more people, do you realize all the money that you could make and you could retire? And the guy says, well, what am I going to do when I retire? I'm going to sleep late. I'm going to have meals with my family. And every evening, I'm going to go and play music with my friends. Wow. Right? There's something about just saying, hey, what is it that I need to do for today? But many times, guys, we see things and we get involved in things. Man, I need that. And we get consumed in that. This past week, as my family and some dear friends, we were on vacation. We spent some time in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, which is the yachting capital of the United States. And when I'm talking about yachts, I'm not talking about yachts. I'm talking about yachts, okay? We're talking like massive, massive boats that these people have. And we took this tour and we're down the thing. And this guy's showing us all this boat. One of these boats we saw, 330 feet long, 5-story tall yacht. Well, I'm like, what in the world? How does this work? The guy's like, yeah, it's a $220 million boat. It costs $375,000 to fill the gas tank. It costs $3,100 a day to park it here. And I'm like, who owns that? And can I tell him about Jesus so he'll tithe at our church? And so we go down the canal, we're looking at all these boats, and the back of this boat just opens up, and there are other smaller boats that are like 40 and 50 feet, and jet skis that come out of the back of this boat. It's like they're having children, and the deal. And I'm like, this is amazing. And so that night at dinner, we're all sitting around together, and it got kind of quiet, and I was like, okay, we need to have family conversation. I'm like, all right, Dad, what are we going to talk about? I said, we need to talk about how we're going to get a yacht, okay? And we kind of, very quickly we said, we don't need a yacht. We just need to tell people about Jesus with yachts so they invite us on their yacht. That's a much, much better deal, right? But we get caught up in this, and what happens is you see this boat is bigger than that boat, it's bigger than that boat, and it's all because somebody just says, I got to have this little bigger thing. In Colossians chapter 3, verse 5, it says this, put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature, whatever's temporary, put it to death and put it way back at the back. It says sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Idolatry, here's the definition of what an idol is. An idol is anything that we put between ourselves and God. Anything that we put between ourselves and God is an idol because we absolutely make it more important than God. It could be a hobby, it could be a thing, it could be a relationship, it could be the pursuit of a sale, whatever it is. It's not necessarily this little statue or something like that we would keep at our house. That's not necessarily an idol. It could be. But ultimately, we need to focus on an audience of one. That's where our focus needs to be. What does God want in this situation? What would God be calling me to do? And so many times, guys, we get caught up in this greed thing because we want to provide bigger and better things for our family. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when that gets out of priority, things get really, really bad. Now, I would challenge you on this. If you're in the midst of buying a house, a car, something like that for a new toy, a new hobby or something like that, and you have in this mindset, how can I afford this? That's the wrong mindset. Because what's going to happen when you start to say, what do I need to do to afford this? You're going to start saying, I need to work more hours. Maybe I need to take a shortcut in making a sale. Maybe I need to misrepresent something here. Maybe I need to do something that I may compromise my integrity in order to get this and do this. How do I do this? Instead of, okay, God, what would you have me do here? What would you have me do in this situation? Is this the best investment? Is this what I should do more than anything? It was so cool. As we were on our trip, we sat at this dinner one night. Our families all sitting together, the 6 of us, which we don't get to do very often. And we had ordered this kind of elaborate dessert that happens. And this guy came out to the table, that built this thing, and he built this dessert at our table. And it was like this 30-minute, just really cool deal. And then we all just ate it and tore it up, and it was awesome. Okay? It was fantastic. But my oldest daughter who was there, later on that night, she came, and as we were walking away, she grabbed me by the hand. And she said, Dad, thank you so much that our entire life, you've always given us experiences over things. Experiences over things every time. She said, thank you so much that you've always given us experiences and memories over things. She goes, we'll never forget this. How great is that? And when we have an audience of one and we focus on eternal things, we forget about things. In 1 John chapter 2, verse 15, it says this, do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. We have to keep priorities. It's okay to want to advance in your career. It's okay to have good hobbies and nice things. None of that stuff is wrong, but it needs to be in the right priority. So, spouses, kids, how do we help our dads? How do we help our men in our lives deal with the pressure of this greed? Is what we keep our own values in line. And here's what I mean by that. Don't always be asking for the next thing. Your dad, your husband, he's a provider, and he's a smart guy. He knows what you need. He knows what you want. He's aware of those things. But so many times we're like, well, I have to have this new thing, or my friend down the street just got these new shoes, and I need these like this, or they just moved to this house, and we need to move in that neighborhood. Every time we talk about those things, it's little chips away at the men in our life, because they start to think like, I'm inadequate, I can't do those things, or I've got to work harder, I'm not doing enough, I'm not good enough, I need to provide more. So we need to make sure that we keep our own values in check when dealing with the men in our lives when it comes to this area of greed. The third thing that I think that keeps us from being the dads that we want to be, that keeps us from being the men that we want to be, and it's this constant pressure that we live in this world today, is lust. It's lust. Now, here's what we need to understand. There's a statistic that says 80% of all men deal with lust, and 20% lie about it. So some of you guys will do the math, and you'll get it later on the way home, okay? Okay. So 80% are being truthful, 20% are, but it's true, okay? We deal with those things, and it's the world we live in. We're very visually stimulated, and we are created with this an attraction to physical beauty. We are, men are done that, we are created that way. And here's what we need to understand about lust. And most sin in our life, it's an abuse of a God-given desire. It's an abuse of a God-given desire. Lust in and of itself is sexual attraction that's being abused, okay? Rest abused is laziness. Hunger abused is gluttony. See what I mean? How these things lead to each other? So guys, we got to make sure that we keep these things in check, because lust in and of itself is addictive and it's destructive. It is the fastest growing habitual behavior in the world today. And guess what? It's moving into our city at an extremely high rate right now. I don't know if you know this or not, but many of the production companies that film pornographic movies and things like that in Los Angeles, they are moving out of Los Angeles and they're moving to the valley here. They're moving to Scottsdale in the East Valley, and the production of those things is moving here because it's so much cheaper to operate here than it is in Los Angeles. And so not only is this a battle we're fighting, this battle is literally moving into our own home territory. It's the fastest addiction in the world, and it will kill your journey with God. It will kill your relationship with your spouse. It will deteriorate the relationship that you have with kids. Any idea for true and real love and intimacy that you have in your life will be destroyed if we continue down this path. So we've got to make sure that we set healthy boundaries. We have to be people who set healthy boundaries when it comes to lust and these physical desires and how we're going to deal with them. And so when we set these boundaries, what we do many times is we set a boundary that's on the edge of where we want to be. And so if something happens and we make a mistake and we cross a boundary, it's catastrophic. You don't want to set your physical boundary just short of having an affair. That's not what you do. You set your physical boundary way over here. You say, you know what? I'm not going to go to lunch with that person of the opposite sex. I'm not going to ride in a car with a person of the opposite sex. I'm not going to do those things. We have many of those policies and procedures set here in the staff of the church. We don't do that. And guess what? There's a lot of times it costs us more money because we got to take 2 cars. You got to take extra people to lunch. But we do not ride alone in a car with people of the opposite sex. And I had to confess this last week, as my youngest daughter's come on staff and she's working as an intern this summer, I brought her to work this week. And so when I got in, I went over to Bailey and I said, I just want to let you know, I brought the blonde new intern to school or to work this morning, you know. And we had a good laugh about it, you know. But we're very, very careful about those things. And because we want to set the boundaries so that if there is a mistake and something happens, it's not a catastrophic deal. So make sure you watch where you set your boundary. And the way we do that is that we understand that temptation is just past where we set our boundaries. We say, I'm not going to go there, so we live in this safe zone. We get tempted when we get up to our boundary or we take a step past our boundary. So make sure that we do that. And here's what I would encourage you to do. Your boundary needs to be as close as possible to God's holiness. Not what you can handle, but what God would expect. I'm not going to go ride around in a car with a woman who's not my wife because I don't want Melissa to get hurt. I don't want to come back to her and her think about something there. I don't want to protect her, as well as I want to protect my marriage and my kids. I don't want them thinking about that. I want to be above reproach in those things. I'm not going to go and have dinner with a woman who's not my spouse. I'm not going to do those things. And I talk with so many businessmen who travel and the struggles that they have with this because their corporations don't understand this. And they'll send a male and a female together on a plane together, and they'll send them to a hotel, and they'll get, you know, different hotel rooms and all that kind of stuff, but they're supposed to go to dinner together and hang out and all this kind of stuff for 2 or 3 days at a time. It's a difficult situation. And many times these guys, they talk about this with their company. They're like, no, we're not going to buy another rental car just so that you guys aren't in the car together. We're not going to pay for, you know, a different flight or a different time or any of that kind of things. We're not going to do those things. Well, I'm just going to be upfront and honest with you. We here at the church are going to do those things. We're going to invest in those things because we want our boundaries to be as close to God's holiness as possible. So, how do we help with the pressure? How do we help the guys in our life, the fathers in our life, the dads in our life, deal with this pressure of lust and what it looks like? Here's what I encourage you to understand. First of all, we're tempted that way. We're tempted that way. We're wired that way. And just because your husband or your dad or whatever has a thought about a woman or something like that, it doesn't make him a sexual addict. It doesn't make him a pervert. It doesn't make him a sexual deviant or anything like that. It's what happens when you deal with how you deal with those temptations. Okay, those things are going to come. We're all tempted in all kinds of different ways, but how do you respond to that temptation? So just the thought of the idea of the temptation in and of itself is not a sin. And so we need to be okay with that, okay? I would encourage you to protect yourself. Protect yourself from your devices, you know, from your phone, your tablet, your computer, and all those kind of things, so that you just make those things kind of inaccessible to you being alone and isolated with those things. Make sure your computer's in an open place in the house so everybody can see it. Make sure that your wife has all your passwords, guys. Make sure she has all your passwords. My wife has passwords on my phone. She can get into everything, see everything. And so that eliminates so many temptations and all that kind of stuff. So make sure that you put some boundaries in. If you need some help talking with someone about that, we would love to talk with you through that. Maybe you as a couple need to sit down and talk about what those boundaries look like for you, okay? So let's understand and identify that we deal with the pressure of lust in our world every day. Now, the final one that we deal with is, I think it's this huge one, and it's catastrophic in our world today, and it's on the increase. And it's this pressure to deal with the spiritual fear that we have. we guys have a spiritual fear in leading our family. We're afraid that somebody's going to ask us a question about the Bible that we don't know about. We're afraid that we're going to come across something that we don't know or understand, and we're going to have to say, I don't know. And that scares us a lot. In in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 23, it says this, for the husband is the head of his wife, as Christ is the head of his church, his body, of which he is the Savior. Now, I've been asked in the past to do weddings and not talk about wives submitting to their husbands, and I won't do it. Because it's out of context. Okay, there's a context that follows that. Because many times in our society today, we think this, when we hear the word submit, it's just, I do what you say, you govern over me with an iron thumb and all this kind of stuff. That's not what this text means. What this text means is that as the husband rules the house, or leads the house, he leads the house with the same love that Jesus had for the church. How much did Jesus love the church? He died for it. He gave everything for it. Guys, that's what you're called to do. You're called to give everything for your wife and your family. You're called to put them above anything else in this world. It's not this, you always get to hold the remote. You always get to pick the movie. That's not what we're talking about here. Okay? That's not what we're talking about. But tell me this, and if we're gut level honest, ladies, don't you want to follow the guy that's willing to give his life for you? Absolutely. If he's going in the right direction, you will follow him every time. And that's the context of this. It's a challenge to for men to be men in this situation. Ephesians chapter 6, verse 4 says this, fathers, do not exasperate your children. This means don't confuse your kids. Don't confuse your kids. And you know how we confuse our kids today? We say something and we do something different. We tell them one thing and we do something. You need to go to church, but you don't go to church. Don't smoke, but you smoke. Don't drink, you drink. Don't do weed, you do weed. See what I'm saying? There's this huge disconnect. When we say one thing and we do another, it exasperates our kids. It causes a problem in our lives. Do not exasperate your children. Instead, bringing them up in the training and the instruction of the Lord. Prioritize godly things. Pick a team, is what Paul's writing here. He's like, if you're going to claim to be a Christ follower, be a Christ follower. If you're going to claim to be a Christ follower, don't do this other stuff anymore. Pick a team. It's kind of like this. Don't put a refinery sticker on your car and drive like an idiot. Okay, don't do that. It's bad. It's bad for everyone involved. But guys, it's our job and our responsibility to set the moral tone for what happens in the home. Now listen to these statistics regarding men in the United States today. According to pewforum.com, 62% of men seldom or never participate in prayer, reading the Bible, or religious activities. They don't pray, they don't read the Bible, they don't go to church. 62% of the men in the United States do not do that. Seldom or never, okay? We call them creasters. They come on Christmas and Easter, okay? Seldom or never, 62%. And you say, well, Chad, I'm here, so I'm one of the 38%. Congratulations. You say, well, I'm preaching to the choir. Maybe I am, but we have to know what we're up against here, right? 62% of the men in the country don't do that. 30% of men seldom or never pray. 30%. 31% of men attend worship weekly. 31% of the men in the United States attend some sort of worship service every week. 33% attend a few times a year. And this was described as 5 or less. Okay? Notice it went from 31 to 33. 35% seldom or never attend worship. Wow. There's an amazing statistic that says this. When a man comes to Christ and he leads his family, 72% of the time, the rest of the family will follow. When a man comes to Christ and he leads his family, 72% of the time, the rest of the family will follow. The wife and the children will follow. 72% of the time. If a woman comes to Christ and starts to try to lead her family, do you know what that statistic goes to? 53%. She's got a 50-50 chance that her family's going to follow. If a child is the first in the family to accept Christ, do you know that there's only a 17% chance that the rest of the family will follow? Guys, 72% chance that the rest of your family will follow you if you lead them in a godly way. So here's what I'm going to encourage you to do. Guys, do not allow church and spiritual things to be optional in your house. Do not allow them to be optional. Make them mandatory. I've told this before. When I was growing up, I had a choice about going to church every week. I could either walk or I could ride. That was my choice. It was not optional. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for that. Do not make spiritual things optional. Don't take a vacation from spiritual things. When you leave over the course of the summer and you go on vacation and you go to other towns and you visit things and you go on vacation, find a church in those other towns and go and visit. Go visit a church that's completely different from this. Go visit some little country church or some big, massive mega church or a Catholic church or whatever it is. Go visit some church that's going to celebrate Jesus, obviously, and experience those things and make those a priority inside your family. Don't take a vacation from faith. Don't take a vacation from your giving. Don't take a vacation from your Bible study. Don't do those things. Because when we do those things, we show our kids that faith is optional. It's something, we can take it or leave it. And we can take vacations from it and come back. That's not what we want to be. We want to be men who prioritize the eternal over the temporary every time. So here's one thing I would encourage you in this final area, is I would encourage you this. Don't leave your best leadership at work, guys. Most of the time, we spend most of our energy, physical, emotional, spiritual energy that we have all day at work, trying to please people who don't even like us, or don't even know us, or don't even care about us. They get our best all day. And then we come home and we're on a reserve tank. We're tired, we're upset, we're angry, we're frustrated. Leave enough in your tank every day that you come home, go to work, and you do your best and work hard. That is a scriptural principle, and work with integrity. But you leave enough in your tank that when you come home, you've got enough for your wife and your kids. Leave enough in your tank that you do that. Make sure that you don't leave all of your best leadership at work. So, how do we deal with this? Or how do we help the guys, the fathers in our lives deal with this pressure? Complement spiritual progress. When you see your husband say, hey, let's get up and go to church. Thank you for doing that today. Out of all the major holiday weekends in the United States that we celebrate every year, Father's Day weekend is the least attended weekend of church out of all the holiday weekends. Do you know what the third highest one is behind Christmas and Easter? Mother's Day. You know why? Because people say, hey, Mom, what do you want for Mother's Day? I want you all to go to church with me and go to lunch. And when you say, Dad, what do you want for Father's Day? I want to go play golf. I want to go to the lake. That's what happens. So when we complement spiritual progress, hey, I see you're going to that Bible study, you're going on this retreat or whatever it is. Man, I'm so glad. And invest in that. How did it go? What did you learn? Hey, tell me about what you're reading today. Show us what you're doing and share with that and participate in. Complement those things and let him know he's doing a good job and he's leading in that way. And I promise what is celebrated in your home will be repeated time and time again. Guys, let's be the men that God's called us to be, inside and outside of our homes. And there's a tremendous amount of pressure that we all deal with. And this weekend, we're going to give you something to remind you of what this pressure is and to deal with it. You are going to get the first ever, well, after the 4 o'clock service, the first ever Refinery Christian Church tire gauge, okay? So when you leave here, you're going to get a tire gauge. Okay, now don't take the back end of the tire gauge and let the air out of the tires that are out in the parking lot. Don't do that, okay? Some of you will be tempted to do that. But it's a key ring, and put this on your key ring. And say, man, we all deal with pressure all the time. We deal with this constant pressure that we live in. But on the side of this thing, it says the Refinery Christian Church because we're making a commitment to partner with you in dealing with that pressure because we all understand it, we know what it is, and we want to be better at it. We want to be better at it. So let this be a great reminder to you. So dads, as you leave this place, don't forget to get your tire gauge on the way out and say, okay, I know it's a pressure-filled job, but man, it's so worthwhile. If I can do it and I can do it well, I can have an eternal impact on the lives of the people around me. Let's pray together. God, we love you and we say thanks for the way that you show up time and time again. And we celebrate who you are and what you've done in our lives. And God, there is a tremendous amount of pressure in this world today on being a dad and stepping up and being a man and what that looks like. But God, your word tells us what being a real man looks like. And a real man humbles himself, he exalts you, puts his family first, works hard, who's kind, who's generous, and through all those things, grows closer to you. He pursues you above everything else. Even the relationship with his wife, even the relationship with his kids, he pursues you above everything else. And we learn what real biblical manhood looks like. And God, it is not some, weak-willed, timid kind of manhood. It is a manhood that calls us to be warriors today. And the way we fight these battles is we fight them on our knees in prayer. We fight them with our hands in the air in worship. We fight them with our hearts open wide and willing to receive who you are in our lives. And so, God, we love you, and we just say thanks for giving us the instructions on how to live this life and live it well. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Well, hey, if you guys need prayer or just want to talk to somebody about some stuff that you guys heard in the message today, we have this room back here next to our audio booth. You swing in there. We have people that have been praying during the service and also want to pray with you about whatever's going on in your life. Again, like we said, happy Father's Day weekend. We brought some vehicles out here that cost more than my entire college education. So if you guys want to check that out, those are pretty cool. But we just want to do something fun for Father's Day. So enjoy that with your kids as you guys are kind of exiting out of here. And then lastly, a couple of weeks ago, we mentioned that we had a team going to Poland. They are getting ready to head back. They'll be back tomorrow night, so I don't really know when they're taking off, but just be in prayer for them as you guys think about if you have some friends that are on that, or if you think about missions, or me just saying this. Take some time and pray for them. Make sure that they have a safe, easy trip, and that God will just continue to use them all the way back until they get here. And it's not just something that stays in Poland, but a life change for these few people that went. So you guys have a great weekend. Enjoy Father's Day tomorrow, and don't forget to tell somebody about Jesus.